I want you to imagine for a second that you're 16 years old.
Right, just a totally normal teenager.
Yeah, exactly. You're a normal kid. You like hanging out with friends, going to the beach, maybe kayaking. But things at home are tough.
Which is, I mean, that's a pretty common vulnerability at that age.
It is, yeah. So you're looking for a way out, or maybe looking for validation, or honestly, just looking to make a few bucks so you can feel a little independent. And a friend, someone you already know and trust, says she knows a guy.
Right, a wealthy older man in Palm Beach.
Exactly. And she says he pays $200 just for a massage. And at 16, you think, well, what's the worst that could happen?
It's the kind of rationalization we have, I think, all made at that age. Because $200 to a 16-year-old in a really difficult home situation, I mean, that feels like life-changing money. It feels like an opportunity.
It really does. So you get in the car, you drive over the bridge into Palm Beach, and the very first thing you notice is just like the blinding white of this estate.
Oh yeah, the architecture there is intense.
It is. The sunlight is reflecting off this pristine exterior so intensely that it actually hurts your eyes, because you forgot your sunglasses. And you walk up to the house, the back doors are thrown wide open.
Creating this totally welcoming atmosphere.
Yes, there's this beautiful, warm ocean breeze blowing right through the halls. Everyone inside is smiling. Everyone is, super friendly. And you don't realize it yet, but you haven't just walked into a mansion.
No, not at all.
You've walked into one of the most sophisticated, industrially scaled psychological traps in modern history.
And that contrast, right, that beautiful sun-drenched breeze against the horrific reality of what was actually happening inside that house, it's just central to understanding how this entire operation functioned. I mean, it completely relied on the illusion of safety.
It really did. And that 16-year-old girl, that was Ashley, and her story is at the absolute heart of our deep dive today.
It's a really powerful account to anchor this whole discussion on.
It is. We are pulling from this incredible and frankly just devastating piece of journalism. It's a WPTV news transcript titled Jeffrey Epstein's Arrest. 20 years later, the secrets that remain.
Right, and it covers a massive amount of ground.
Yeah, a sprawling 20-year timeline. It actually brings us all the way up to a really recent event, a May 2026 House Oversight Committee field hearing in West Palm Beach, Florida.
Which makes this highly relevant, for anyone listening right now who is trying to understand power dynamics today. Because we aren't just doing some historical postmortem on an old tabloid scandal here.
No, definitely not.
The WPTV interviews, and especially those recent congressional hearings, they demonstrate that institutional protection of the powerful is an ongoing active machinery. It's a mechanism we absolutely have to dissect if we ever want to understand how our justice system actually operates behind closed doors.
Exactly. And I want to be really clear with you listening right now. Our mission today is not to, gawk at the sensationalism of this case.
Right. We're avoiding that completely.
Yeah. We are here to fundamentally dismantle the societal misconceptions around grooming. We really want to understand the exact mechanics of a catastrophic, multi-level breakdown of the justice system. And most importantly, we are going to center the voices of the survivors who are, to this day, still fighting for a shred of accountability.
And to understand how a system fails that massively, I mean, we really can't start at the courtroom.
No, we have to start on the ground. We have to look at how these crimes were actually executed day in and day out.
And doing that requires us to just completely discard this incredibly toxic, pervasive myth that the victims, should have known better.
Oh, I hate that phrase so much.
It's the worst. Because when you actually study the transcripts of what happened in those rooms, you realize that knowing better just wasn't an option. The environment was meticulously engineered to override a teenager's basic defense mechanisms.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's go back to Ashley walking into that house. The environment is super disarming, like we said. And then Jeffrey Epstein appears, and he's wrapped in a towel. Now, the WPTV transcript notes that he immediately senses her nervousness. But he doesn't act creepy, he doesn't act aggressive at all.
Which is key.
Yeah, he actually reassures her. He makes the whole thing feel incredibly light and normal.
He normalizes the abnormal.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, without a doubt, step one of the grooming process. Because grooming is not a single traumatic event, right? It is a meticulously paced process of boundary erosion.
Right, just slowly chipping away.
Exactly. In that initial interaction, he sits down and he asks her about school. He asks if she's staying on track for college. He's positioning himself not as a predator, but as a mentor. He is showing this deep, seemingly genuine interest in her future.
And the interviews highlight this massive flood of validation. Like, he was telling these young girls they had immense potential. He actually wrote college reference letters for one individual.
Which is just wild to think about.
It's crazy. And he promised another girl who dreamed of being a model, he promised her that he had high-level connections in Paris.
And this is where we really have to pause and look at the psychology of the target here, because predators are exceptionally skilled at identifying the cracks in a person's foundation.
Right.
As you mentioned, her difficult home life, right? Well, a predator looks for that specific deficit, whether it's a need for a father figure or financial instability, or just a desperate need to be seen and told they are special. They find that crack and they fill it completely.
You know, it makes me think about how we build technology today. Like, Epstein's grooming tactics were essentially a highly sophisticated predatory algorithm.
Oh, that's a really interesting way to frame it.
Think about how your social media feed works, right? It doesn't just show you random videos. It gathers data. It tracks your likes, your fears, how long you linger on a post about a specific insecurity.
Right. It learns you.
Exactly. And then it feeds you exactly what it calculates will keep you engaged, keep you trapped on the platform. Well, Epstein was doing this manually. He didn't just cast a wide random net. He extracted data on each girl's dreams and vulnerabilities, and he fed them this bespoke, custom-made illusion of safety and importance.
That is a brilliant analogy. It really is an algorithm designed exclusively for human exploitation. And the end goal of that algorithm, always, is absolute control.
Right.
Imagine being a teenager who suddenly has a billionaire taking a profound personal interest in your life. It creates this totally intoxicating illusion of special status. You feel like you've been chosen.
Yeah, like you're somehow above everyone else.
Exactly. But that illusion is merely the anesthetic applied before the surgery. I mean, it's just the vehicle to ensure you don't run when the abuse actually begins.
But wait, help me understand this timeline. Because based on Ashley's account in the transcript, this wasn't some month-long courtship before the abuse started.
No, not at all.
It happened on day one. She is led into his bathroom. There's a massage table right in the middle of it. And as soon as he flips over, the boundaries are just totally shattered. Things escalate immediately into abuse.
Right.
So if the abuse happens that fast, why wouldn't the instinct just be to bolt for the door, like grab your stuff and run?
Because of the environment he had just spent the last hour carefully constructing. See, when an assault begins, the brain of a traumatized person often bypasses the typical fight-or-flight response and goes straight into what we call freeze.
The freeze response, right?
Yeah, it's a heavily documented neurological reality. When your brain quickly calculates that fighting a powerful adult is impossible and fleeing a billionaire's mansion where you feel entirely out of place is dangerous.
Your body just takes over.
Exactly. Your nervous system basically hits the brakes. It shuts down your physical responses so you can simply survive the immediate trauma. And Ashley's own words from the transcript perfectly encapsulate this. She literally says she was frozen and waiting for it to be over.
Wow. But the truly insidious part, the part that just makes my blood run cold, is what happens after that initial abuse.
Yeah, this is the darkest part.
Once that boundary is violated, the trap isn't just closed. It's actually locked from the inside by the victim themselves.
This is the most crucial and honestly often the most misunderstood mechanism of this particular trafficking ring. Because after the assault, Epstein would tell the victims, bring your friends, let them be a part of it, and you'll get more money.
But why would a victim do that? Why would you ever bring your friend into that terrible house?
Because of how deeply trauma isolates you. By manipulating the victim into recruiting their peers, the trafficker is forcing them into a state of complicity.
Oh, I see.
The victim now feels responsible. They are no longer just a victim in their own mind, right? They believe they are now a perpetrator. They are silenced by their own trauma, yes, but more powerfully, they're silenced by the immense guilt and shame of having brought someone else into the nightmare.
So they feel like they can't tell anyone.
Exactly. If they go to the police, they truly believe they will be the ones in trouble for recruiting. It just guarantees absolute silence.
And we really cannot discuss this industrial-scale machinery of abuse without talking about the logistics of how it was fed. Because a single man cannot maintain an operation of this magnitude without a massive top-of-funnel recruitment strategy.
Oh, absolutely not.
The WPTV reporting explicitly points to Ghislaine Maxwell's role in this. She was scouting massage schools, she was at public parks, she was literally standing outside of local high schools.
And without her, that initial contact, that vital first step of identifying the vulnerability, It just doesn't happen at that scale. Maxwell was the necessary bridge.
How so?
Well, think about it. A middle-aged man approaching a 16-year-old outside a high school raises immediate alarm bells for anyone watching.
Oh, for sure.
But a wealthy, sophisticated, well-dressed woman, that inherently lowers a young girl's defenses. Maxwell completely normalized the approach. She was the one constantly feeding new targets into the machine, which allowed that predatory algorithm you mentioned to operate without interruption.
Okay, so we've established the ground level reality here. We see exactly how vulnerable teenagers were manipulated, how they were frozen and forced into complicity.
Right.
But here is where we have to zoom out. Because the true horror of this deep dive isn't just the existence of a predator. It's how that predator effectively manipulated, neutralized, and ultimately benefited from the local justice system itself.
This is where it gets really infuriating.
Let's look at the catastrophic breakdown that occurred in 2007 and 2008.
Right. And, to be fair to the initial investigators, the local Palm Beach police actually did their jobs at first.
They really did.
The WPTV transcript highlights that 40 victims came forward to give their statements. 40.
Wait, let me just stop you there. 40 victims. In literally any normal jurisdiction, if the police have 40 separate victims giving corroborating statements about an individual, that person is going away for multiple lifetimes. I mean, how does a local prosecutor look at 40 sworn testimonies and not immediately secure a massive conviction?
Well, because you're assuming the system operates on a level playing field, right? Where the law applies equally regardless of the defendant's bank account.
Which it clearly didn't here.
What happened next is a masterclass in how wealth completely short-circuits the American justice system. Law enforcement recommended charges that, yes, would have put Epstein behind bars for decades. He likely would have died in state prison. But instead of a trial, we got the infamous 2008 sweetheart deal.
The non-prosecution agreement. I really want to dig into the mechanics of this because it honestly sounds like a crazy conspiracy theory, but it's just documented legal history.
It is entirely real.
He pleaded guilty to 2 minor state charges. And his punishment, 12 months of community service. And wait, it gets worse. Where did he serve this community service?
Unbelievably, at his own nonprofit.
He essentially was sentenced to go to work for himself during the day and just sleep at the county jail at night.
Not only that, but the federal agreement granted outright immunity to 4 of his named co-conspirators. The federal prosecutors just agreed not to bring any charges, completely bypassing the standard protocols of the Justice Department.
How does a prosecutor justify that?
This happens when highly paid, wildly aggressive defense attorneys threaten prosecutors with endless resource-draining litigation, public smear campaigns, and intense political pressure. The system just buckled under the sheer weight of his wealth.
But what absolutely sickens me about this 2008 failure, like beyond the legal loopholes, is how the system treated the victims during this whole process.
It was horrifying.
The charges were drastically reduced to child prostitution. I want you listening to think about that phrase for a second. Child prostitution. During the proceedings, the prosecutors actually sat these girls down and interrogated them as if they were the criminals.
Yeah,
They were asking these traumatized teenagers if they knew they were breaking the law.
Let's really analyze the legal framing there, because by labeling these crimes as child prostitution rather than sex trafficking, the justice system instantly shifted the burden of criminality right onto the victim.
Exactly. Laura Cusack, the director of programs at the Human Trafficking Coalition of the Palm Beaches, she's quoted in the WPTV transcript, and she provides a really vital definition here.
I remember that part, yeah.
She defines human trafficking as involving force, fraud, and coercion to engage in commercial sex acts. But in 2008, the legal system just completely ignored the coercion element.
Completely. And we need to expand our understanding of what coercion actually looks like. Because people often think coercion means like a gun to the head or being locked in a dark basement.
Right, like something out of a movie.
But coercion is far more insidious than that. One survivor explicitly noted in the transcripts that she feared her visa was tied to him and that she'd be deported if she spoke out.
Wow, that is terrifying.
It is. Coercion is the very real, terrifying belief that if you go to the police, you will be the one arrested. Because society, and frankly the law back then, viewed a prostitute as a willing criminal, completely, regardless of their age or the massive power dynamics at play.
You know, the geography of Palm Beach actually serves as this haunting metaphor for the whole situation. The WPTV piece points out this really stark dual identity.
Yeah, the two sides of the island.
Palm Beach is known as the home of presidents, but also the home of Jeffrey Epstein. When you drive over the bridge onto the island, you enter this pristine world defined by these massive high hedges.
Right.
And those hedges are literal, they're everywhere, but they are also metaphorical. Because enormous wealth buys an expectation of absolute privacy. It buys you the ability to hide what one person in the transcripts called a really disgusting world, right in plain sight.
And behind those hedges, the system was actively partnering with the traffickers. I mean, think about the psychological damage inflicted by those prosecutors.
It's just immeasurable.
Epstein's grooming was specifically designed to make the victims feel guilty,
Right.
to make them feel like willing participants. And then the very institutions designed to protect them, the prosecutors, the state,
They just reinforced it.
yes, they looked at these young girls and effectively said, yes, Epstein was right. You are the ones in trouble. The system formally validated the abuser's lie.
It's institutional betrayal on a staggering scale. These teenagers learn at the absolute most vulnerable moment of their lives that the safety net doesn't exist for them. The system protects power, and it will happily sacrifice a vulnerable kid to maintain the status quo.
Which is such a heavy realization.
Yeah.
But, you listening might be thinking, okay, well, 2008 was a dark time. Laws have changed. The Me Too movement happened. Surely the institutions have learned their lesson and course-corrected by now.
Oh, man, I really wish that were true. But this brings us to a part of the WPTV reporting that is just infuriating because it shows this betrayal is happening right now, today, just disguised as transparency.
Let's fast forward to that May 2026 House Oversight Committee field hearing in West Palm Beach.
Right.
This hearing was specifically convened to investigate the Department of Justice's handling of the Epstein files. Survivors and advocates really hoped this would be a moment of reckoning. It was tied to the Epstein Files Transparency Act.
The goal was to finally unseat the documents, right, to expose the powerful network that enabled him for all those years.
Exactly. But the execution of this so-called transparency was an absolute nightmare. The DOJ released files that inexplicably exposed the victims while continuing to heavily redact the names of the powerful individuals involved.
We have to look at the specific example given in the testimony. It's about victim one, Danielle Hanna. The administrative failure here is almost hard to comprehend.
It really defies logic.
The DOJ went through these massive document dumps and painstakingly redacted her nickname, Danny. Like someone sat there and physically or digitally blacked out the nickname, but they left her full legal name completely unredacted.
It's just horrifying incompetence.
Over 500 times. Her full name was exposed to the public internet over 500 times in those unsealed documents. How does that even happen? Is it a faulty software algorithm? Is it a clerk with a black marker who just wasn't paying attention?
Regardless of the mechanics, the fallout was absolutely catastrophic.
Yeah.
The human cost of that administrative error is profound. The testimony details how Danielle's husband learned of the specifics of her abuse for the very first time by reading it in unsealed court documents.
Oh my gosh.
Children of survivors learned about their mother's trauma from strangers on the internet, from predatory reporters knocking on their doors, even from other kids at school who saw it on social media. Employers and students of these survivors suddenly had unfettered access to their most deeply personal, traumatic moments.
I have to ask this on behalf of everyone listening because it is the question screaming in my head right now. How can the Department of Justice, an institution literally named for the pursuit of justice, claim to be doing its job while simultaneously prioritizing the privacy and comfort of implicated billionaires over the physical and emotional safety of Jane Doe's?
It's indefensible.
I want to read a direct quote from the survivor testimony that just hit me like a ton of bricks. She said to the committee, "Releasing my name while redacting the name of other powerful is not a mistake, it's a choice."
And that quote strips away all the bureaucratic excuses. It frames it perfectly. When you have the resources of the federal government, leaving a victim's name exposed 500 times while carefully hiding the names of powerful associates, that is an active choice.
It has to be.
In clinical terms, what we're witnessing here is profound secondary trauma. Specifically, it's institutional re-victimization.
Let's just sit with that for a second. Institutional re-victimization.
For 20 years, these women have done the grueling, agonizing, totally invisible work of trying to heal. They built marriages, they raised children, they established careers, they somehow pieced their lives back together.
Yeah.
And then their identities were violently stripped from them and broadcast globally by the very government entity that was originally mandated to protect them back in 2008.
And the craziest part, the DOJ is still withholding half the files. They haven't even released everything yet.
And that ongoing legal battling, the selective redactions, the unforced errors by the DOJ, it creates this massive cloud of noise. And this noise is incredibly dangerous because it completely contaminates the true narrative.
What do you mean by that?
Instead of society focusing on the systematic abuse orchestrated by Epstein and his high-powered network, the public focus is shifted to the spectacle of the document release itself. It becomes a circus. And it keeps the survivors trapped in this perpetual, agonizing cycle of public exposure without ever actually delivering the justice they were promised.
The DOJ's careless unmasking of these women isn't just an isolated clerical error, though. It's a symptom of a much wider cultural sickness. We see that exact same disregard for victim safety in the way the general public talks about this case.
Oh, absolutely.
The institutional failures we just outlined are directly mirrored by the failures of society at large, which means we urgently need to talk about victim blaming versus actual accountability.
The WPTV interviews really highlight the fundamentally flawed questions that these survivors are subjected to by the public on a daily basis.
Like what?
Questions like, why did you go back? Why didn't you tell anyone? Where are your parents? And perhaps the most callous and frequent one, you got paid, didn't you?
Those questions are so deeply ingrained in our cultural response to abuse. And honestly, it's a defense mechanism for the public. If we can blame the victim's choices, we can tell ourselves that it would never happen to our kids.
Right. It's a way to feel safe in a scary world.
But we have to look at the massive psychological toll those questions take on the survivors. The reporting describes this overwhelming guilt, shame, and self-blame that doesn't just fade away over time. It lingers for decades.
We see the real-time destruction of their youth right in these transcripts. Ashley talks openly about how the trauma derailed her life. She became withdrawn, she became angry, she was placed on academic probation, and actually kicked off the cheerleading squad.
And then things escalated.
Yeah, she started hanging out with a dangerous crowd, and she ended up getting pregnant at 17.
And what she said about that pregnancy just stopped me in my tracks. She said getting pregnant at 17 probably saved me.
It's a staggering statement that forces you to completely reevaluate everything. A teenage pregnancy is typically viewed by society as a crisis, right? A derailment of a young girl's potential.
Usually, yes.
But for Ashley, it was literally the only available exit ramp off of Epstein's assembly line. The responsibility of a child was the only thing powerful enough to break the psychological hold of the trafficker. I mean, it just highlights the absolute terrifying desperation of her situation.
And the impacts don't magically stop when these girls turn 18. The interviews note that these survivors suffer severe long-term effects on their parenting styles, their marriages, and their fundamental ability to trust other human beings.
And layered over all of that grief and trauma is a very real, very justified anger. Imagine trying to heal, trying to just go to the grocery store, watch the evening news, and seeing your abuser's face everywhere in the media for years. He becomes this sick cultural phenomenon.
And then the ultimate slap in the face. Epstein was allowed to die by suicide in a highly secure federal holding facility, a prison that the WPTV transcript notes once held a World Trade Center bomber.
The security there was supposed to be impenetrable.
Exactly. The fact that he was able to end his life effectively denied the survivors their day in court. It denied them the one thing they had waited 2 decades for, the chance to sit in a courtroom, look him in the eye, and watch a jury hold him legally accountable.
So, how do we process this? What does this mean for us as a society when we evaluate cases of systemic abuse?
Well, I want to say this directly to you listening right now, because this is where we all have to take responsibility. When we ask questions like, why did they go back? Or why didn't she just leave? Well, we are acting as unpaid defense attorneys for the abuser.
That is so true.
Think about the sheer absurdity of it. We are demanding perfect rationality, flawless decision-making, and immense courage from a traumatized, manipulated 14 or 16-year-old child. And at the exact same time, we're giving a total free pass to a calculated, wealthy, powerful adult who spent millions of dollars orchestrating an international criminal enterprise.
Which raises the central question of this entire deep dive. What does actual accountability look like? The survivors in the WPTV transcript are making a very clear, desperate plea to the public.
What are they asking for?
We have to completely reframe our cultural perspective. We need to stop endlessly interrogating what the victims did and start relentlessly asking what Jeffrey Epstein did.
Exactly. We need to ask how much effort, money, lawyers, and manipulation he expended to ensure those girls felt they had no choice but to come back. And we have to confront the darkest, most tragic reality of this entire network, which is exactly how those victims were weaponized against each other.
This is perhaps the most difficult part of the transcripts to read. The painful truth is that underage girls were manipulated into recruiting other underage girls.
And people judge them so harshly for that.
They do, but the reason why they did it is heartbreakingly simple, yet entirely misunderstood by the public. They were brought into this trap at an age where they couldn't possibly comprehend the scope of what was happening, and they eventually recruited their friends because they just didn't want to endure the abuse in the bedroom themselves anymore.
It's the ultimate psychological weaponization. The trafficker essentially outsources the grooming to the victims. He turns the victims into his recruiters, ensuring that they will carry the guilt of his crimes forever.
Right.
It's a mechanism designed to destroy solidarity among the vulnerable.
It shifts the moral burden entirely onto the shoulders of children. And society has largely fallen for the trick, judging the girls for recruiting, rather than judging the architect who designed the maze in the first place.
It genuinely makes my stomach turn to think about the level of sociopathy required to design a system like that. But after detailing all these horrors, the intricate grooming, the forced complicity, the catastrophic 2008 sweetheart deal, the 2026 DOJ transparency failures, we have to look forward.
We do.
Where do we go from here? What concrete mechanical changes have actually been made in the wake of this, and what is our responsibility moving forward?
Well, according to the hearings and the interviews, there has been some systemic reform, particularly in Florida, which has been trying to position itself as a leader in policy changes lately. For instance, there's now mandatory human trafficking training for frontline staff across the state.
What does that actually look like in practice, though?
It means we are broadening the net of who is looking for the signs. We aren't just relying on police anymore. We're talking about hotel workers, school administrative staff, nurses, massage therapists, and even dental staff.
Dental staff, really?
Yeah, they're being trained to spot the specific indicators of trafficking, whether that's a patient who isn't allowed to speak for themselves, someone showing signs of physical abuse, or a teenager who seems excessively controlled by an older companion who won't leave the room.
That makes a lot of sense. The testimony also mentions the establishment of joint task forces. You have the FBI, Homeland Security investigations, and local police departments all working together in the same physical locations.
Which is a huge structural shift.
Yeah, the idea is to improve communication and response times so that if 40 victims come forward again, the case doesn't just fall through the jurisdictional cracks or get buried by a local prosecutor who feels outgunned by expensive lawyers.
Those are important structural changes. But, we have to balance those positive steps with a stark, sobering reality check provided right in the transcripts.
What's that?
During the reporting, Laura Cusack, again the director of programs for the Human Trafficking Coalition, she is asked point blank if she feels like victims today have better systems in place to protect them than they did in 2008.
And what should she say?
Her answer is a flat, immediate, no, I don't at all.
Wow. That is a chilling assessment. She is on the front lines dealing with this every single day, and she doesn't think the safety net is any stronger. How do we reconcile that with all these new trainings and task forces?
We have to synthesize the dual nature of progress here. Ground-level policy changes, like training a dental hygienist to spot the signs of trafficking, are incredibly vital. That is a tangible good that will undoubtedly save individual lives.
Right.
But those ground-level policies are fundamentally insufficient if the judicial system at the highest levels still operates on a two-tiered basis.
I see what you mean. It doesn't matter if a hotel clerk spots a trafficker if the DOJ is just going to botch the paperwork and protect the billionaires funding the operation.
Exactly.
A system that actively protects the rich and powerful while happily exposing the vulnerable renders ground-level training almost moot in the grand scheme of justice.
And the survivors are extremely clear about their demands to fix this systemic rot. They aren't asking for pity. They are making concrete demands. First, they were demanding that the DOJ release all the files, fully unredacted when it comes to the perpetrators and the enablers.
Stop hiding the clients. Stop hiding the people who flew on the planes.
Exactly. Second, they're demanding that the rest of the network be prosecuted. Because, as the congressional hearing noted, there are over 1,200 victims mentioned in these files.
1,200, that's just an unfathomable number.
And Jeffrey Epstein did not abuse 1,200 people in a vacuum. There was a massive logistical network of pilots, schedulers, financiers, and clients. The survivors' message to the authorities is simple and damning. Do your jobs.
And their message to the public is even simpler. Believe the survivors. Which brings us to how this applies to you listening right now, because you might not be a federal prosecutor or a sitting member of Congress, but you definitely have a role in this. Education is our only true shield.
It really is. We have to accept the reality that we cannot take all the bad actors off the streets. The system is just too flawed, too easily manipulated by wealth to catch everyone.
So if the fortress walls are broken, we have to teach our kids how to wear armor. We must educate ourselves and our children on the exact, specific signs of grooming. We
Well,
can't just tell kids stranger danger. That doesn't work.
no, because it's usually not a stranger.
Right. We have to teach them that excessive, unearned flattery from an adult is a massive red flag. We have to teach them how isolation tactics work. How a predator will try to separate them from their friends or family by making them feel like nobody else understands them.
That's a huge one.
We have to teach them that the illusion of a special status, being chosen for something secret, is a weapon used to control them.
And beyond protecting our own children, we have to fundamentally shift our cultural default from skepticism to belief when someone comes forward with allegations of abuse.
Yes, 100%.
As the transcripts note repeatedly, it takes an unbelievable, almost superhuman amount of courage for a survivor to speak out publicly, knowing they will face a barrage of victim-blaming questions. The absolute least we can do as a society is offer them a baseline of belief, rather than immediately interrogating their past actions to find a reason to dismiss them.
Okay, let's bring this all together. Today, we've walked through a really heavy but incredibly necessary timeline. We started by examining the insidious, calculated mechanics of Epstein's grooming algorithm, breaking down how the illusion of choice was used to freeze and control vulnerable teenagers.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We analyzed the complete failure of justice during the 2008 sweetheart deal, where wealth bought immunity and prosecutors literally criminalized the victims. We looked at the modern-day institutional betrayal of the 2026 hearings, where the DOJ carelessly exposed victims like Danielle Hanna while shielding the powerful. And we discussed the critical, urgent need to shift society's blame from the shoulders of the traumatized to the actions of the abuser.
It is a vast, complex web of systemic failure, legal loopholes, and psychological manipulation. But at its core, if you strip all the legal jargon away, it is fundamentally a story about human endurance.
Absolutely. And I want to reiterate a crucial message that permeates the survivor testimonies, specifically to anyone listening who might have experienced something similar or who is carrying their own unseen trauma.
It's so important to hear this.
You are not alone, and it is not your fault. The guilt and the shame belong entirely to the person who harmed you and to the systems that enabled them.
Before we wrap up, I want to pull one final brief moment from the source transcripts. Amidst all the heavy discussion of congressional hearings, redacted documents, and decades of trauma, one of the survivors talks about finding a sense of healing and grounding in nature. Specifically, she mentions sitting on the beach and watching a sea turtle.
I noticed that detail too. In a transcript filled with so much institutional darkness, it just seemed like such a fragile, poignant thing to focus on.
I want to offer that as a final thought for you to ponder today. Think about the life cycle of a sea turtle.
Okay.
It is a creature that survives immense instinctual adversity in a deeply hostile environment, just trying to keep moving forward against the currents to survive. The justice system we discussed today was built by humans. It was supposedly designed to protect the vulnerable. Yet for these survivors, that very system has acted exactly like a hostile, dangerous ocean, constantly threatening to pull them under.
Wow, that is a devastating comparison.
If a survivor, after enduring the absolute worst of human predation and decades of institutional betrayal, can still find grounding and connection in the simple, quiet resilience of a sea turtle, what does it say about us that we still haven't built a society that offers them the same unconditional safe harbor?
That is a profound question to walk away with. How can you, in your own community, in your own family, or in your workplace, become part of that safe harbor rather than contributing to the hostile noise? How do we build a world where the vulnerable don't have to be as resilient as sea turtles just to survive the institutions meant to protect them? Thank you for joining us on this intense, essential deep dive today. Keep asking the hard questions, stay curious, trust your gut, and always keep seeking the truth behind the headlines.